Sudan now, where hundreds of thousands of people face severe hunger and the risk of starvation due to a blockade that has cut off humanitarian access and food supplies for over a year. In April of 2024, the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces imposed a siege on El-Fasher in a bid to take the city from Sudan's army. El-Fasher is the capital of North Darfur and remains the only city in the region not to fall to the rebel forces. Now, many residents fleeing the city have sought shelter in Tawila, where some aid is available, but videos sent from inside El-Fasher show people forced to survive on animal feed.
These children are being starved. Hundreds of thousands of people are trapped here as a 2-year-long conflict rages on. El-Fasher, the capital of North Darfur, has become one of the main battlegrounds between Sudan's army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. With food running low, aid organizations say people are surviving on hay and animal feed made of peanut shells.
The NGO brings us bread, sometimes a small portion of corn per person, sometimes a cup of oil, other times some rice. We are just staying here and waiting. We are exhausted all the time.
Tawila, a town near Sudan's war-torn El-Fasher, is overwhelmed. Over 500,000 people have arrived here since April, when the paramilitary attacks intensified. Huda Ali is a mother of 4, who, like most of the displaced, fled from El-Fasher to Tawila.
After we arrived in Tawila, the aid group gave us some simple things. But that's not enough. There's a lot of rain now, and cholera spreading. I hope they can provide us with medication.
Sudan's rainy season is compounding the crisis. Flooded shelters, poor sanitation and scarce medical aid have triggered a deadly cholera outbreak. It has claimed over 50 lives so far. Those who've made it to Tawila still aren't safe. They face continued attacks and extreme hardship. Inam is one of them. She recounts the horrors as paramilitary fighters closed in.
They attacked us again. It was exhausting. They said, "Where are the weapons? Where are the men? You are slaves." If they find someone with a mobile phone, they take it from them. If you have money, they take it. If you have a good, strong donkey or something like that, they take it from you. They kill people. They killed people in front of us. They took girls and raped them in front of us.
While some have made it to Tawila, many more remain trapped in El-Fasher, encircled by the paramilitary forces with no safe way out. Roads are blocked and there's no way for aid to get in. The threat of famine grows bigger daily.
I'm joined in the studio now by Shayna Lewis. She's a Sudan specialist and senior advisor for the organization PEMA, Preventing and Ending Mass Atrocities, which works with communities in Sudan. Welcome to DW. Now, what can you tell us about the situation in El-Fasher right now?
Thanks for having me back, Nicole. I mean, the situation in Sudan, particularly in El-Fasher, is dire. Children are eating peanut shells, and they're eating peanut shells because the Rapid Support Forces have besieged the city for over a year at this point, but it's particularly in the past 2 months that they've tightened that blockade. Nothing is coming in and out. We used to have donkey carts that carried food into the city, but now barely anything is able to even be smuggled in. So we have footage of children with their rib cages exposed, feeding off of these peanut shells because there is nothing left in the city at this point. And it is incumbent on the belligerents, on the Rapid Support Forces, particularly to allow safe humanitarian access into the city, because the images that are coming out of El-Fasher are just as bad as other contexts globally. But this isn't just El-Fasher in Sudan, it's across the country. We're also seeing similar scenes in South Kordofan, in a region that borders on South Sudan, which is also under the control of the RSF government, if we can call it that. And again, this blockade on aid, which is having serious consequences on Sudanese civilians. Hunger is natural, famine is not. Famine is a political decision. It is a weapon of war that is being wielded across the globe at the moment, but this has to stop. It is against international humanitarian law. It is a crime internationally, and it needs to be prosecuted as such.
Yeah. El-Fasher is under siege. There are people trapped there, and we're hearing reports that people were promised safe passage, that they were promised to get out by the RSF, and then they were killed while trying to flee or after having left El-Fasher. It really seems like there's no safe place even for civilians right now.
No. We can't say that there is a safe place anywhere in Sudan for civilians at the moment. And when we think about the genocidal campaign that the RSF has been waging over these 2 years of war, it makes a lot of sense that they're blocking the safe passage of civilians. When the RSF attacked Zamzam camp, Sudan's largest camp for internally displaced persons, in April of this year, they continued the genocide that they have been perpetrating, and we see what is happening in El-Fasher as the next continuation, the next act of genocide. And Europe stood up decades ago and said never again. Yet at this time, we're seeing multiple genocides happening across the world, and without action, particularly led by European leaders since the retreat of the United States from the international realm since January, this will continue. There needs to be pressure put on the belligerents to allow safe humanitarian access for convoys and also for humanitarian workers into the city. When the RSF attacked Zamzam back in April, 8 members of the Relief International team were killed. They were targeted. These are targeted attacks against medical workers, against humanitarians who are trying to risk their lives to save civilians in their communities or in these areas of civilian population. And everyone is being targeted. It has to stop now.
We have been focusing on El-Fasher because that is where most of the atrocities were happening. That siege, what little reporting there has been on the situation was focused on El-Fasher, but now we're hearing that there is also intense fighting in Kordofan. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's the area I was just mentioning. Yeah. The locus of the fighting now is actually in the Kordofans, not just in South Kordofan, but also in the north. The RSF, the Rapid Support Forces and Sudanese Armed Forces are focusing on this area now that the Sudanese Armed Forces have recaptured the capital. Things have shifted towards the west. But part of the difficulty in telling this story is the information blackout that we're all trying to operate under. The internet has been weaponized in Sudan. Only last Friday, I believe, the Sudanese Armed Forces government switched off WhatsApp, which doesn't sound like much to you and I, but that is the main form of communication for most civilians in the country, not only for communicating internally, but for also accessing the outside world. So, I really sympathize with the media at the moment in trying to tell the story of what's happening in Darfur and across Sudan because it's so hard to get the information out. So we also need the international community to step up and push diplomatically for the lifting of this telecoms blackout. We have to have the internet turned back on across Sudan.
Yeah. This is right now the world's largest displacement and hunger crisis. What is happening in terms of diplomacy to end civilian suffering in Sudan?
I mean, the short answer is very little, frankly, especially since the beginning of this year. There was an effort by the US, which should have taken place about a week ago, where they were trying to convene the main external backers, so the countries who are profiting and funding this war, and that is Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates. Now, that process has stalled. It's been postponed to a later date, and we'll see what comes of that process. But frankly, there isn't enough international effort to push for a ceasefire in Sudan. We love, the African Union loves to say African solutions to African problems, but frankly, the African Union has been completely absent on Sudan since the beginning of this year, at least. So there needs to be a concerted international push at the moment to get the belligerents to come to the negotiating table. The Rapid Support Forces and Sudanese Armed Forces are very explicit at the moment that they will not come to the negotiating table, and that is not a negotiation position. So we need much more pressure by the external backers.
Shayna Lewis, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's bring in Mutasum Ali, a doctor of jurisprudental science candidate at American University in Washington, D.C., and an expert in international humanitarian law. Good to have you with us, Mutasum, again. Just looking at these famine-like conditions in El-Fasher, do they constitute a violation of the laws of war from your point of view?
Thanks, Somi, for the opportunity. I also represent the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights. And there is no doubt that what is happening in El-Fasher is an obvious breach of international humanitarian law and international human rights law. We now know that for more than 15 months, the RSF has turned El-Fasher into a death city, right? Civilians in El-Fasher women, men, and children are deemed legitimate military objects. And so the little children that we've just seen in the report live in trenches to protect them from daily shells by the RSF. And now now they're facing mass starvation in El-Fasher. The RSF refused to implement the UN Security Council resolution to end the siege in El-Fasher. External actors supporting the RSF in a total breach of UN Security Council resolution on arms embargoes on Darfur have been breached time and again. And so what we're seeing in El-Fasher is a major humanitarian crisis that not only the warring parties and the RSF are responsible, but also the international community for failing to uphold their duties to protect civilians in El-Fasher.
Right. And on that note, Sudan State TV is reporting that the army has destroyed a plane from the UAE carrying Colombian mercenaries in Nyala, which isn't far away from El-Fasher. How can the UAE and other foreign parties be held accountable for fueling conflict in Sudan?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we've been seeing in the last couple of months is the numerous reports about credible reports about mercenaries, right, from Colombia and I'm sure from other countries as well. And I think the common state here, or the main state that is responsible, is the UAE, right? From some of the documentation we see that the Colombian mercenaries went through the UAE and then made it to Libya and then to Sudan. And so as the Raoul Wallenberg Center, we made it our sole duty to go after foreign actors fueling the conflict in Sudan. I think the only way to end the atrocities is by targeting the actors fueling the conflict. And I think there are numerous options that the international community and human rights organizations can do to hold external actors, including the UAE, accountable. Of course, there are many other actors in addition to the UAE, but the UAE is the most responsible. And I think one of the things that we've been working on is a case against the UAE before the ICJ on different grounds. And we continue to pursue that for breaches of international conventions, including the Convention on Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And I think there are other things that we can do by pursuing domestic prosecutions or civil lawsuits against corporations sending arms or trading gold, enabling the perpetrators of atrocities accountable. And so we are surveying multiple options against the foreign actors fueling the atrocities in Sudan.
Okay. I'm afraid we've run out of time, but thank you very much, Mutasum Ali. Always good to have you on the program.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Tony.